It's intermission time. It's great to get out to the movies.
I'm Megan Braun. I am the host of the Synagogue podcast Intermission, and today we have a very cool guest. Can you intro yourself?
Yeah, I'm Amy Canaan Mann.
Thanks for being on here.
Thanks for having me.
How would you describe yourself in your role in this industry? What type of title?
I would say I'm a writer, director, producer, storyteller, filmmaker.
All the above.
All of the above, yeah.
A lot of people that come on, I just feel like have so many hyphenates to what they do because that's kind of what the industry entails.
Yeah.
This is a question we ask every guest that comes on the show. If you were to pick a film that describes your life right now, what would it be?
I think I would have to pick maybe Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the Frank Capra movie.
And why?
I think I'm, in the film there are these Boy Scout characters who are big fans of, Jefferson Smith, Jimmy Stewart character. And I feel like one of those guys. I'm just sort of like in the wings, reading the newspapers, watching what's going on, waiting for the Jimmy Stewart character to show up, and just kind of watching the kind of small moments of revolution that I see a little bit happening in the country. And I don't know. I guess I feel, as I think a lot of people feel, that we're just at this really critical, pivotal, historical moment in this country. And it feels like, as, I don't know, wonderfully sappy as that film is, it feels kind of relevant. The context of it, the message of it feels really relevant. I think we're just sort of, that's the point that we're at.
That is a cool answer. And no one has said that before, which I love when we get something new.
Oh, thank you.
So, Amy, you have worked on TV and film. Your previous two films were Texas Killing Fields in 2011 and then Jackie and Ryan in 2014, along with TV like House of Cards, Friday Night Lights. What is the project to you that stands out as like, this was your baby? This is like your most sentimental project?
Oh, boy. They're kind of all my babies, honestly. You just, every director approaches filmmaking differently, which is really interesting. And we don't really know how each other does it because, by definition, unless you're working in a partnership, you're kind of isolated from other directors. It's funny that way. I had the good fortune of being mentored by some really incredible folks. But yeah, I think that for me, I don't know that I can, which I think is a blessing and a curse. I don't know that I could do the work without completely falling madly in love with the subject and the film and wanting it to be as resonant and successful in its own way as possible.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And you spend so much time on each project too, so it's like little worlds of its own.
Right? Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What's something someone would assume about your directing style that they would be wrong about?
I think that somebody might assume with any director that there's a kind of way, that there's a kind of creative approach that they would walk in with in terms of the act of directing that sticks, that's consistent. And I think that's true in some ways, but I think it's actually the approach to the task, to the creative task, that's consistent. But for me, it's important to be continually evolving and learning and growing, and that's what I loved about doing TV. I did 5 years of TV completely by design.
Why?
Because I was at Venice Film Festival with Jackie and Ryan. Texas Killing Fields was also at Venice, but I was at Venice Film Festival with Jackie and Ryan. And with independent film, which is I love independent film through and through, independent film baby right here. But I saw a poster for John Ford, and somehow, for some reason, it listed all his credits. And I realized that I didn't recognize half of his credits before there started to be movies that I'd see. And I was like, oh, wait, the studio system was different then. And as a director, you got a chance to test things and fall on your face and make mistakes, and the stakes were just lower. Whereas here I was at Venice with Jackie and Ryan, and the stakes were just, as with an independent film, the stakes are incredibly high. And I thought, I need to stop doing independent film and do TV so that I can just have boots on the ground and that I can be forced to use different skill sets than I would instinctually use. So I, by design, kind of chose different shows. I was lucky and got to be able to choose different shows to do sometimes. And so I would say, okay, Queen of the South was Shots Fired, which I directed with Gina and Reggie Bythewood were the producers, who are incredible. Everything was handheld, which is not my instinct. I don't love handheld. Huh. Everything was handheld and everything had to have foreground. That was just the visual mandate of the show. So I didn't have all the tools in my toolbox, and I was kind of restricted by this visual prompt, which was fascinating. Yeah. And I had to kind of wrap my mind around, like, okay, how do I do my approach to the story, my approach to the characters with this visual mandate of must be handheld, must have foreground in every shot.
Oh, that's cool. You're having these like curtails for yourself and just thinking outside of the box.
Right. You're forced to, via restriction, you expand. Mm-hmm. And then that was so different than House of Cards, where the mandate was there's no pans or tilts. It's all you're dolling right and left, or you're booming up and down. So the which was amazing.
That show was so good.
It was incredible, and it was also the kind of show where, like, Friday Night Lights, I shot my episode in 5.5 days. It was like 3 cameras all the time. We go. As opposed to House of Cards, which was, there was an amazing camera operator named Gary J, who's since passed, but he was sort of the visual extension of Fincher, what Fincher had set up. He was an amazing camera operator. And we would just stand on set and talk for 15, 20 minutes about whether the lamp should be in or out of the shot and what that meant. And, because the mandate of House of Cards was nobody was trying to hose anything down. You got 3 very efficient setups, and then you focused on the performance, and then you were out. So
almost play-like.
Yeah, exactly. And where the dolly grip was an extension of the camera, which was an extension of the directorial eye, which was a totally different approach. And nothing is better or worse, but it was just amazing to have the experience of having a series of different restrictions that were, almost like writing prompts that and at the end of it, I really, when I was doing Audrey's Children, I really felt the benefit of having done TV in that way. It was such a varied approach to the craft.
Wow, that is so smart. I'm loving this. That's so interesting that it was so intentional. That's cool to hear. So now I'm going to get into questions directed just at your general movie taste to get to know what you gravitate towards prior to getting into your film, Audrey's Children, that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
This actually kind of goes with what we were just talking about. But for a consumption standpoint, are you someone who prefers TV or film?
I like both. I know that's a cop-out of an answer, but it's true.
When it comes to TV, what type of TV? Do you like a limited series or something you can just like binge watch a million seasons?
Yeah, so grew up, weirdly, when I was little, I grew up in a town of 900 people, and we had one channel on our TV. And we had no theater. I really was sort of like, didn't really know much about film and television until I came to LA to go to USC Film School, which I think was a weird sort of benefit in that I have, like, I'm still to this day incredibly not cynical about film and television. I just love it. I'm still like blown away, But when I was a little bit older, it was just, there was a lot of TV, and TV in a weird way kind of like raised me. So I love television, and I love kind of like delicious television, whether it's like something like White Lotus that's so, visually fascinating and the character study, or, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, to be honest, which I think is contemporary Shakespeare.
Those are both what I'm watching right now.
Really? There you go. All right, I'm in good company.
That's funny. That's and Severance. Those are what I'm
Severance
consuming.
Is great too.
That's funny.
And then films too. Films are amazing, and films sometimes are now kind of like are going more long form, aren't they? With like The Brutalist and Oppenheimer stuff.
That's why we're pro intermission here.
Yeah, exactly.
So growing up, what kinds of films would you gravitate towards genre wise, and how has that evolved as you've aged? Are you someone who like had a genre of film that you really weren't touching until you got older?
No, like the films when I first started being aware of films as a thing that can change your life. I was probably in high school, and I don't think, and it was The Hunger, Tony Scott, that great David Bowie movie. And, Apocalypse Now, which I happened to catch as I was like walking through the living room. It was on HBO and I was like, wait, what? I was also kind of obsessed with, like, really genuinely obsessed with Grease, the film Grease. It played in our mall in Indiana, and my friend and I would go and see it. I think I must have seen it like 8 or 9 times, and we knew all the songs and dances. And the theater would be empty, but we would do the songs and dances like in the aisle. And so it's really always been that varied. I don't really know, and I don't think that's really changed all that much. I mean, as I got exposed to, when I went to UC Film School and we had film crit classes, of course, I was like, oh my God, you guys, there's this dude named Truffaut. I don't know if you know him, but he's really good. So it kind of expanded that way. But still, I think that the thing that always, I think because I grew up the way that I grew up, and I was sort of, I grew up as an only child with my mom. There's a kind of anthropological like a kind of critical distance, I feel like, and that with kind of the world in general, and so I really love films that also are kind of in line with that idea. Like, let's take a deep dive into this world, into this group of people, into this culture, into this story that you wouldn't necessarily know otherwise. That seems to be the common denominator for me, and that can be anything from Real Housewives to The Brutalist. Yeah.
What's a movie you saw at way too young of an age that completely messed you up in a good or a bad way?
Oh my God, there's this crazy movie called The People Under the Stairs.
Okay.
I think.
You can look stuff up too if you want to like check.
Yeah, it fucked me up. I saw it when I was like 7, and it's probably not that scary, but I had a vivid imagination, and it was. Oh, and there's another movie that it might have been a movie of the week starring Robbie Benson, I think, about a kid. This one really fucked me up. About a kid who accidentally murders someone or something, and his mom creates a safe house kind of situation for him within the walls of the house, and then she dies, and then a new family moves in, and he's still there as a teenager, like spying on the family in these weird corridors that she had built to protect him from the. Yeah, I know.
That's
right?
a crazy plot.
I know.
That's wild. I like that.
Yeah, I guess there's a common denominator. I was afraid of like things behind walls, and, like, people still being there, and
there's a term for that I've seen online where, like, if you buy a home and you find out that someone's like in your attic living there or something. Okay, what is a near perfect film to you, but there's one small thing you'd change?
I mean, I'm just gonna go back to Grease.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that Grease is a near perfect film. And then it's always bothered me that I love her outfit at the end with the candy sandals and like the I don't know, satin tight pants. But even when I was a kid, I was like, that's not what they wore. Like, it felt very, it was like, it's like that movie, which is another favorite movie of mine, Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve.
Okay.
It's a great film. And so he's like, he falls in love with a portrait. He wills himself back in time. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's really worth
No, I
seeing.
haven't.
It's great. He wills himself back in time, and he brings with him a wardrobe for the period, which is turn of the last century, which he gets at a secondhand store. And right at the apex of the love story, like he's met the woman and the portrait, and they're in love, and they're going to run away together, and it's amazing. She's leaving her terrible manager, and they've had this incredible romantic weekend, and he's just goofing around, and he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a penny, which was and the penny's from the year that he bought the suit from, which was the contemporary time period. And that penny pulls him out of the is it illusion, is it real, of being in the time period that he's with this woman, and he kind of like disappears from her.
Oh, interesting.
And so I feel like one movie to explain another movie. I feel like those satin pants that she wears, which she looks great in. It took me out.
Yeah,
I was like at the very end. Yeah, it was like this last little but that's not
that kind of goes
accurate.
into a question I'm going to ask you later about your film. Just like the notion of like paying attention to all the details and accurate to a time if it's like a true story. That's funny. Yeah, that also made me think of the second movie you were saying. Did you ever see Midnight in Paris?
Yes.
Like your example story made me think of that movie where but he's like literally in a different time, but he's in the present day. It's not Matthew McConaughey. It's Owen Wilson, right? Owen Wilson in this movie.
Yes.
Anyways, that was what came to mind when you were talking about just like what was the name of your movie? You said
Somewhere in Time.
Somewhere in Time. I'm gonna write that down now. What's a movie you love that you would never recommend to someone just because it's too like niche or weird?
Yeah, I would have to say, like, for a minute, I was a little bit obsessed with pre-Hays Code movies from the 1930s.
Okay.
So I don't really know what got me on that weird rabbit hole in the time, but I spent months watching them. Like I was, so it was like before, because the Hays Code came in the 1930s, and it was sort of a precursor to House of Un-American Activities, McCarthy stuff, and it was before. So there was regulations about like you can't talk about prostitution, you can't talk about drugs. But this weird thing about how Lucy and Desi Arnaz are sleeping for some reason in twin beds in their own bedroom, like that was a Hays Code thing. But before that, there was this time period where it was like anything goes.
Yeah.
And there are these great old Barbara Stanwyck movies where she's like a woman that literally like what's it called, baby face, where she literally just sleeps her way to the top of a corporation, and it's interstitially cut with like, here she's now been hired as a secretary, and it's the shot of the lobby in the building, and then the camera, then there's like a little vignette, and then the camera pans up to like when she gets, and then finally until she's living in like she's married the owner of the corporation, and now she's living in the penthouse above so the camera just moves up the building.
Oh, that's funny.
They're just like, they're really raw and gritty and just very kind of, they're kind of like what the French New Wave ended up doing after World War II, but they're very sort of like, near realist, and this is life. And it's a really interesting kind of like, I don't know, 15, 20 year period, maybe not even that long, of before the Hays Code came in, and you couldn't, there were all these rules and regulations. So I don't know, that stuff's maybe a little bit niche.
That was really fascinating. I did a little bit, because I didn't go to film school or anything. I'm just a consumer of film, but through doing this podcast, I've learned a lot. And what you were just touching on, I did a little bit of research for a prior guest, because we were just talking about the focus of women in film and portrayal of women throughout film. And so I knew maybe the surface level of what you were just explaining, and it's so interesting. And I also wanted to ask, when you were doing that deep dive, you said a month or two of watching films from that time, what part of your life were you in? Was this you as an adult watching these films, or is this you in college at USC? When did you get into that?
This was me as an adult watching films. I mean, at college, the film crit classes were amazing for me, who really just, as opposed to every other student that I was in film school with, who knew everything. They knew everything. They came as film fans. I came as the weird punk rock chick who developed her own film and smoked cigarettes in the darkroom in Indiana. That was my sort of thing. I just didn't really know much. So I was just sort of taking everything that it was. But I think it created this kind of oh, wait. Because I spent actually at USC, I spent a lot of time. I was one of two women in the production program.
Whoa.
Yeah. It was the late 80s.
Yeah.
It was a different world. I loved the teachers. I loved the instructors. I loved the access to the film. I didn't love the culture. The culture was a whole thing. It was very sort of Gordon Gekko-y, and it was a whole weird hustle thing that I just couldn't relate to. But it was great to have access to the cinema library, and I think that's where that came from. Where I sort of didn't really fit in with the. I made a lot of movies. I got I was lucky and pitched and got chosen to make a lot of. I did a 480, and I wrote and directed a 480 and all that. But I really spent a lot of my time in the library watching movies. And I think that's where I kind of got that habit of I'm going to go down a thing and follow the thing. And things get self-referential, and this guy did this, and then this woman did this, and let me follow that trajectory.
That's fun. I love a rabbit hole.
Yeah, there's nothing better.
I don't know if anything would come to mind, but what's a crime thriller movie that you think has the most underrated performance in it?
Body Heat.
Oh, I love Body Heat.
Kathleen Turner.
Yeah.
Body Heat's she's amazing, right?
What is a film that completely redefined a genre for you?
One of my favorite all-time films is All That Jazz. And I was always a big fan of musicals. I just love musicals. So I think that movie is just, I don't really like rank things or have like top tens or whatever. It's just sort of like at this moment in my life, there was I got to be exposed to this. I think movies are like books. They come to you when you need them to tell you something you need to know at that time, either about your life or yourself or filmmaking. And All That Jazz was that for me. It redefined the genre for me because there's a formula for musicals, and I was sort of a little bit obsessed with like MGM musicals and all that, and they are definitely formulaic, and that's kind of the beauty of it. There's a formula, and yet you can kind of get lost in the magic of how they make that formula feel yet completely unique when they're successful, right? When the movie is successful, it can feel unique, even though you know that in 2 minutes there's going to be a dance number. So All That Jazz kind of completely redefined what you could do with something that was so almost clinical and almost sort of exacting. Like, what if you didn't do that formula? Or what if you did the formula, but it was so deeply personal in a way that the MGM musicals are not, that you would have no even idea that you were standing on the platform of a formula at all. And then also for a movie musical, it's what it did in terms of sound design was like mind-blowing. Like just the sort of the specificity of the sound choices that he chose and when he chose to do that. So not only the music and the dance, which I was just completely in love with, but also just now we're just going to hear the snapping of the fingers. Now we're just going to hear the lighting of a cigarette. Now we're going to just hear him exhale, the cigarette smoke. It showed me that you can break all the rules and you can also still be within a genre and still have that breaking of the rules be successful within that genre.
I love this answer. That is a really, really cool, train of thought that you went through. I love that. Would you ever direct a musical?
Oh, I would love to direct a musical.
Really?
Yeah, I would love to. That would be great.
We need more musicals.
I agree. I mean, it's something I really want to direct a horror movie, not like a psychological thriller sort of horror movie, and I really want to direct a musical. I'd love to do that.
Sick.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love
did a
that.
TV show in Canada that was shot in Canada. I can't remember. No Tomorrow, and we had a little musical number, and I was like, okay, guys. I was like to the camera guys, I'm like, all right, this is a movie from 1935, and notice how they do the camera work, and this is what they do. This is how we're going to do it, and it was just so much fun.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
Did you ever do musicals? Like growing up or anything like that?
Yeah, I did a lot of theater, but but we never did musicals. We just did straight theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun. I'm a musical theater kid.
Are you?
Musical theaters, yeah.
Oh.
Okay, now we're going to get into your film, Audrey's Children. Audrey's Children stars Natalie Dormer as Dr. Audrey Evans, whose pioneering work in pediatric oncology saved countless lives. Known as the mother of neuroblastoma, her efforts reduced the mortality rate by 50% and today by 85%. She also championed a total care approach, addressing both patient and family needs, including founding the Ronald McDonald House Charities. So first, I'm just going to start off. It's starring Natalie Dormer. Did you have any part in picking her as the lead? And did you have someone you were envisioning to be this character, since it's a real person? I know that must be difficult.
Yeah, no, we were. It was definitely. I'm pretty hands-on in terms of casting. So I'd seen Natalie in the remake of Picnic at Hanging Rock, another brilliant film. The original, the remake's totally fine too. But she was in the shot that was a great shot where we're just on her back. And it's like the introduction to her character, and we're following her through this house. And she had such power just in her shoulders. And then there's a moment where Natalie just turns to the camera, and I'm like, oh, there's Audrey.
Oh, wow.
You had to have, I remember hearing an interview with Peter Weir, actually, who directed Picnic at Hanging Rock, the original one. And he said something I thought was so true, which is that when you're casting, you really are discerning the essence of the character. Because people's essences don't really change. Meryl Streep is so facile. She can do 1,000 different things, but she has a sort of Meryl Streepness that she takes to every character, right? So you're discerning the essence that you need of the, and I'm paraphrasing him, but you're of the character that you need, and then you're trying to find the actor who can align with that essence that you've already defined. And so I knew that Audrey needed to be somebody who was had a kind of steel spine and had a kind of fire in her and a determination, and was also capable of being flawed, and that you could kind of feel like you were walking shoulder to shoulder with her. You wouldn't resent her ambition. You would, she would never be a victim of, because, she kind of messes things up, and she kind of, things go sideways for her in the story sometimes. So you wouldn't feel like she was ever a victim of circumstance or her context that she's working in, being a woman working in the field dominated by men in 1969. But you would sort of feel like you were with her. And though she was unique in her kind of unabashed ambition and her kind of quirkiness and intense myopic vision, you still felt like you could be aligned with her. And I feel like Natalie really had that.
Yeah, definitely. No, all those characteristics you just said, I completely saw her embody when I was watching it.
Great.
Yeah. And then you also had Jimmy Simpson in here, and I thought he was such a cool pick. I wrote some things I've seen him in, Black Mirror, Westworld, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
I love like dark humor like that. And obviously he's an actor, and every actor, like their job is to play different types of people, but it was just so cool to see him do something so different. I really enjoyed the pairing of the two of them and their friendship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Jimmy
I love that it was friendship.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, Jimmy was my first choice, our first offer, and he said yes.
Oh, wow.
So it's like a director's dream.
Yeah.
I was like, it's Jimmy Simpson. It has to be Jimmy Simpson. So I was a big fan too. And he was another really tricky casting thing because, as you say, it's a friendship. I mean, it's a love story, but it's an intellectual love story.
Yeah.
Like they love how each other thinks.
Yeah.
And I was really excited about being able to tell a love story between a man and a woman where they're talking to each other and they're just because
I kept thinking, I was like, this is really good communication.
Right, yeah.
It was like,
they're having their battles, they're having their fights, but they respect each other and they're frustrated with each other, and and you can see intimacy grow on a purely intellectual basis. And yet it's no less resonant or romantic in a way. So in order for that to happen, you need to have somebody who had a kind of compassion without being soft, or else you wouldn't respect him. She would just bowl him over, and had a kind of strength of character himself to go toe-to-toe with her, but not in a dominating way, or else you wouldn't respect her. So it needed to be somebody who had very different qualities than her, but that were totally complementary and equivalent. There needed to be total equanimity, and I really feel like Jimmy was able to pull that off. I think they all did it. I had an incredible cast. I'm very proud of the work we did together.
okay, in regards to the story, the topic itself, did you have any prior ties to like pediatric oncology or the Ronald McDonald House? Did you already have knowledge of this story? What drew you to this?
No, I had no knowledge of it at all. I didn't know about her. I was sent the script, and there was a scene in the screenplay. I was like, okay, all right. This is interesting. I can see how it was. It immediately presented me with an interesting directorial puzzle because I could see how it could veer into a certain type of movie that I wouldn't want to make. But if we pulled everything to this other direction, it could be in a genre, I guess all that jazzy, right? Like in a genre, but a little bit undermining the genre and doing something that was a little bit off kilter with it. And the scene that really was like where I was like, okay, I think this is something I need to try to help tell, was where she's on the roof and she's talking to one of her patients, who's a little girl, about how to conceive of her own mortality. And I thought, my God, who wants to put themselves in that? Nobody wants to talk to a child about how to conceive and understand of that child's own death. That is a high, high, high calling. So, and I knew enough at that point to know that she was somebody that's what she did. And she did it on the daily, and she did it for decades, and she did it for thousands of kids. And I thought, this is somebody who really, their story needs to be told, because it's such a, I don't know, it's such a beautiful thing to have an instinct to want to do for children.
When you were saying that when you read the script, you didn't want it to go in one direction, you had like a vision for it. What was the one direction that you were afraid it would be or become?
It could have become, well, I guess there were two dangers with this. One of them is that, it's a story about children with cancer, which if you ask anybody on the street if they want to like hang out with that idea for an hour and a half, the answer is going to be no, right? So that was one challenge. And then, there's a kind of genre of medical dramas that are a little sappy.
Like a Grey's Anatomy type of...
I just didn't want to do, yeah.
I
felt like, as with most tragic things in the world, right, there's a kind of reality to it that is, if I could in the direction, and we could as the cast and crew get specific enough to have the movie feel real, then perhaps it would be a kind of seduction into that world, and then by the end of an hour and a half you realize you've just heard a story about kids with cancer. And then also, if it could be specific enough to the time and the place and the people, and authentic enough to that experience, it wouldn't feel like genre movie about hospitals. It would just feel like these people's story. And that to me presented an interesting challenge.
Were there any specific films or directors that shaped your approach to making this movie?
I mean, I would have to say nothing really, no specific directors, actually. I mean, I think this sort of like we stand on the shoulders of kind of situation. Just how so many directors I esteem and love are able to pull off what they pull off, and just kind of studying them. Yeah, I mean, everything. And really the directors that do that amazing work of creating whole worlds and whole universes to have the audience be sort of walking in for a minute.
Were there any specific directorial choices like camera work or pacing that you felt were crucial to bringing this story to life specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I come from a photography background. I mean, as I said, I was that darkroom kid, so I'm pretty camera heavy. We tested a bunch of lenses. We ended up with these vintage Hawk lenses that are beautiful. And I was just talking about this at CUNY the other day. I ended up using mostly a 40 mil. The Hawk lenses, the vintage Hawk lenses, are really fascinating because they kind of, which you might have noticed, they almost concave at the edges, and they're a little bit, and it's almost like a subconscious thing where the center of the lens is incredibly sharp. And I wanted the lens to kind of be an extension of how she was as a character. I mean, she was so tenacious and so myopic and so focused. So I chose the Hawk 40 because it had also that myopia, but not in a way that was obtuse or on the table. You just kind of like felt it. You just felt the camera kind of compel you to look in the center, because the center was where the sharpness and the focus was. And then also, I play viola, so I'm a musician. Oh, wow. So I think about,
you do so many things.
Right, just I guess
you do a lot.
But you know what? They all kind of end up relating. You know, they all, like, being a musician has really helped me be a better writer, which has helped me be a better director, which is in turn kind of end up, you know, helped me be a better photographer. They all kind of play in. And I think that being a musician and you know, playing music since I was a kid, I definitely think of the movie as a piece of classical music. You know, that there are moments that need to be staccato and there are moments that need to be legato, and that like, here's a moment where we need to just, like, you know, the shots and the cuts need to feel like it's all pizzicato, it's just very tight. And here's a moment where we need to just stop. You know, and here's a moment where everything's going to sort of shift and it's like the next movement of a piece. So, yeah, I think that that's just, I mean, there are a lot of ways that there's a lot of components to how my decisions are made in terms of like camera and lenses and costume and production design and that. But I think in terms of the overall arcing of the narrative, it ends up being kind of like, as you say, pacing. It ends up being like a musical approach.
It's funny. I don't even know if this will make sense to you, but when I finished watching your film today, I texted these two, and I was like, I feel like that was just a real movie, and I didn't know like how to explain it. It just felt like movie. If like it had the heart, and it just felt like something that like I would see at a theater with like my family. I didn't even know how to put it into words. I was hoping it would come into words later today, as in now, but it's still not. But it just felt like a real movie. I don't know.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you so much.
Oh, this is something that I had said earlier that I was going to come back to, recreating the era. What were the biggest challenges in making the film feel authentic since it was a real story?
Yeah, that was really, really, really important. Because as I said before, like, you know, my bet was if we can make it authentic, people will feel like they want to be there. Which isn't that what we want as a director, right? Like, we just want to be good hosts in a way. You know, you don't have to see the back of the house. You just have to sit at the table as an audience member and something is served to you beautifully. You have to sort of enjoy it. Like, that's I think, in a way, the role of a director. So part of that is just making sure that all the details are exactly precise. In terms of challenges, it was a sort of challenge accepted kind of thing. I love period pieces. I'm pretty detail oriented, and I love the task of making sure that we were 100% correct, that we didn't have the penny, that, you know, moment from like Somewhere in Time or the Grease fail, you know. I say that with all due respect to Grease. That we, you know, that everything felt, even if you weren't of that time. I mean, I wasn't around in 1969. I mean, I was born in 1969, but I don't remember anything. But that even if you felt like you were in the world. So that was everything from color palette choices. I mean, the mandate was Ektachrome. I wanted everything to feel like Ektachrome. So no primary colors, really deeply saturated, very judicious use of red. You know, there's only one moment where I used red. From that to all the way, you know, to making sure the locations were completely accurate, that the cars were completely accurate. I guess the biggest challenge might have been the cars, actually. Yeah. I'm a bit of a car person, and I those needed to be real and it's a pet peeve of mine when you see period film.
Oh yeah, you said you have a cool car. You are.
Oh yeah, no, my first car was a 1957 Plymouth, which I still drive, and then I drive now a 69 Alpha. But
anyone who can, because I don't know anything about cars, so anyone who can like just have the whole car name in their lexicon, I'm like, I don't even know what I drive.
I like I think they're art on wheels. But you know, sometimes you see movies and it's like, it's this movie set in 1945 and all the cars on the street are from 1945. And I'm like, no. Yeah. No. Some of the cars would have to be from the 1930s. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that there were, you know, that it felt real. Yeah. All the way to the authenticity of the medical stuff. You know, my objective was that nobody, because we work so closely in terms of research and some of the people that Audrey worked with the medical community at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and they were so kind to be there with us and on call anytime we had questions. I wanted no one in the medical community to be able to watch the movie and be like, no, that's actually not how you hold a syringe. You know, I wanted them to feel like we had respected what they do to such an extent that every piece of equipment, every way that we handled the equipment was exactly right on.
What message do you hope the audience takes away from watching this film?
The message that I hope the audience takes away from watching this film is really something that I felt when I read the script, which was in 2022. And the message is that, you know, the film is set in 1969, so not that different of a political climate than the one we're in now. I'm sure in 1969 people felt also that they didn't know what was going to occur en masse with the country, that there was a great division, that systems seemed to be falling apart. I think there's probably an argument to be made that this moment is a little bit more extreme than the moment in 1969. And I feel like Audrey was aware enough to feel that in the environment the world that she was walking through. And to have an awareness that maybe we cannot fix the big things, but perhaps we can do what we can do. You know, that she couldn't fix the world around her, but she could try to solve the mystery of why this one specific cancer, how it can be treated for these children. And that maybe that's the message that I'd like people to walk away with, is that we should all, whether it's we tell the story or we work with the kid or we write the book or we fix the cars that do that there is a thing that we can do to help, and it won't be fixing the whole system, but it will be something, and maybe it will make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, I love that. Now, a quick little game called Director and Their Best Film. I'm going to go through different directors and just whatever comes to mind, best film according to you. You say the film. Okay, first we have Michael Mann.
Oh, that hardly seems fair.
What would you say?
All right, I'm going to say that, oh gosh, with the caveat that I don't necessarily know if it's his best film,
okay,
but it's the one that's closest to me. I worked with my dad on one film, and because I wanted to have worked with him on one movie from the very beginning to the very end just once, and then I was going to like go off and do my own thing.
You're so strategic. You think things through, like with your answer with working in TV as well for that set amount of time. I think that's really cool. Anyways, go on.
It's either strategic or it can also look random. It can also be like, let's do this now. But
you seem like you have a lot of like purposeful thought into what you do.
Yeah, I'm definitely a planner, definitely a thinker, which hopefully helps with directing. But so I was lucky enough for that film that it was just the timing to be Heat. So I was on Heat from when it was just my dad and I and his assistant in the office. That was it. All the way through prep and production and post and release.
So fun.
And I wasn't actually working for him. I was working for the line producer, who had another assistant who did sort of the assistant-y things. So I got the tasks like, Amy, go find a gyroscopic helicopter mount and go figure out thermal photography, go make connections with people who are convicts inside Folsom Prison and arrange for like Val and Bob to go to prison.
That's also something, sorry to cut you off, but like your dad and you are both are really detail-oriented also with your film, like the accuracy aspect.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something that we have in common. I was lucky enough to be able to see that desire to get it right. Out of a respect for the people that you're telling the story about. My dad was born and raised in Chicago, and I was born in London, raised in Indiana. So I wonder if there isn't that kind of commonality. Like we both are a little bit, outsiders watching kind of thing. And and very much connecting with the people that were telling the stories. There was a whole on Heat. Part of my job was to like connect with there was a group called the Pelican Bay Information Project, which is a bunch of ex-convicts that had just come out of the Pelican Bay facility, which is in Northern California, which is a very extreme high security prison, where the guards had their own gang, and they would part of their initiation was to treat prisoners in a not terrific way in order to be. So there was all these, and so when you meet people who have just come out of that kind of a prison, like I did, I flew to San Francisco and interviewed a bunch of guys. You want to just honor the access that people are giving you. I mean, we have such a responsibility as storytellers, don't we? I mean, I don't ever take that for granted. The responsibility, the beautiful responsibility of help. All of my films, from this one to Jackie and Ryan, which was about travelers and based on a guy that I met in Austin randomly on the street who was a musician traveler, to Texas Killing Fields, which was based on real events, and I met the families of victims and the cops and spent a lot of time in Texas City. And when you ask people to tell you their truths and they are gracious enough to do that, I guess you just feel compelled to make sure that you're doing it with as much respect and authenticity as possible.
Oh, that's commendable. Okay, well, with that, we'll go to the next. So Heat was the answer.
So I'm going to say Heat, yes.
Okay, next we have Martin Scorsese.
I really love Casino.
Mm.
I think Casino's a great, great film. And that's another terrific, actually, that would have been a good answer for the thriller, like underrated.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's terrific. Sharon Stone in that film.
Bong Joon-ho.
Parasite, right? Parasite.
Love.
Yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola.
I'm going to do the same criteria I did before. I don't know that I would say objectively it's the best,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say that it had a real impact on me, which would have to be Apocalypse Now, which, as I said, like I saw completely on accident and had no idea who he was and no idea what this was. I happened to be, walking across the room when it was on TV, and it was the scene where the helicopter lands and the Playboy bunny comes out, and it just blew my mind. So I'm going to say that, yeah, in terms of, for me, best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 3 more. Akira Kurosawa. Do any films come to mind?
I'm going to go Rashomon.
Amazing. Stanley Kubrick.
Kubrick I love so much because he was sort of the reason why, one of the reasons why I chose so many different genres to shoot when I was doing TV, because I just love how he is like, I'm doing a thriller now I'm doing a horror movie, now I'm doing, now I'm doing a weird love story. I'm going to say, again, with the criteria of that affected me, The Killing.
And then finally, we'll do David Lynch.
I want to say Mulholland Drive. I love what he's doing in Blue Velvet. I'm going to go with Mulholland Drive.
I love it.
Yeah.
So just, this will be rapid fire, as in like short, quick answers. We'll just kind of like run through them and then we'll close out.
Okay.
A movie character you've had a crush on.
Okay, just because I just watched it, I'm gonna say Jimmy Stewart in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
I love it.
Okay.
Director you wish would make one more movie.
I want Jane Campion. I want to see what she's doing now. Yeah.
A film you think would make an incredible stage play.
Okay, because I just saw it. I think Mr. Smith Goes to Washington would actually be a really good stage play. It could sort of be a companion to Hamilton. Like, let's talk about what America's made of, kind of thing.
Best time of day to watch a movie.
In the morning.
Best movie theater snack.
Junior Mints.
Biggest mistake in Hollywood right now.
Distribution, an independent film, meaning the difficulty of distribution for independent film. Having sold out a little bit to the tech companies, I think that was probably, in retrospect, not. We'll come back from it. We'll be okay. We'll fight, but it's gonna be a fight.
And my final one, which actor or actress is an automatic sell for you no matter what the film is?
Emma Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's so talented.
She's so good. She's so consistently good. So yeah, I'll watch anything she does.
Cool.
Yeah.
I was thinking about what I would say, and I was thinking Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe, totally, yeah.
And then a crossover would be Willem Dafoe and Emma Stone were both in Poor Things.
That's right, yeah.
And
they were great together.
Kinds of Kindness, if you ever saw that. His movie he made right after.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
It's wacky.
Oh, okay.
It's out there. Okay, so we'll close out with you just plugging your film again, when it comes out, where people can see it, and yeah.
Yeah, so Audrey's Children comes out March 28th in about 200 plus theaters at the moment. So go see it in your local cool independent theater.
Sweet. Well, thank you for coming on. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. So did I. Thank you.
Yay. Now it's time to get lost.
Good evening.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. To stay in touch, follow our Instagram page at It's Intermission Time and share with your friends. As always, Intermission is produced by Jazeel Chu and Olivia Dean, and of course, hosted by yours truly, Megan Braun. This episode is brought to you by The Synagogue.